So hello, everybody. My name is Cameron Crow. I'm one of the founders of Ponga, and I'm going to be your host and moderator today. I'm joined by Ponga co-founder, Barbara Tien. Thank you all for coming and welcome to the Ponga demo webinar. This is the final of our 4 Meet Ponga webinars. Before we get started, I'd like to do a little bit of housekeeping. First, the event's going to be recorded and it'll be available to you after the session. We'll be sending emails out with links and you'll be able to come to the website and see several of the resources and links that will be included in the recording. All attendees are going to be on mute, and the communication controls are located at the bottom panel of your screen. I suspect most of you have used Zoom before and understand how to use them. Raise your hand, Q&A, etc. We'll answer as many questions as we can. Just toss them into the Q&A, please. We'll separately add some content and resource tips into the chat window so that we can keep you up to speed as we're going through the demo on links that you can use that will point you either to services or more in-depth content that we can cover in a 1-hour webinar. Before we get started, I know many of you are new to Ponga, so I'm going to give you a little background. This is the only commercial we'll give you about the overarching value proposition. Ponga is a digital storytelling service that was born essentially out of the realization that we're about a generation or two from losing awareness and appreciation for the stories and legacies that shaped us, our values, and who we are as individuals. We need to capture, preserve, curate, and circulate these important memories and stories. Ponga was created with this in mind, and we developed several elements to support this goal. It's an online service that enables your activities across 3 domains. First, to quickly and easily arrange and organize your photos using our unique facial organization technology. Second, to curate and tell the stories within those photos, either in written or verbal form, adding any number of resources to the photos like maps, locations, multimedia content, etc. And then lastly, and perhaps most importantly, is to put those photos back into circulation to share and collaborate. Friends and family can enjoy the content, and you can crowdsource stories from others in a completely secure and private way. We also provide services for supporting your efforts, onboarding services with 101s and group events, user support if you get stuck or have a question, and FAQs to help answer common questions. We also have a very involved community with subject matter experts, webinars, and content like you're getting today. We also have a resource for how-tos, success stories, blogs, and very unique use cases. And we also provide master classes and jumpstart programs to help you get going, either individually or with your family or a group of people that are committed to a common theme. So by the end of the session today, you'll gain actionable insights for photo organization, curation, distribution, and collaboration. So with that small introduction, Barb, take us away.
Sure. Thank you, Cameron. It's a delight to see so many of you here. I'm thrilled to have this opportunity to walk you through it. As so many of you asked in our previous webinars, let me actually see it work. So we wanted to walk you through, and I look forward to doing that. And I look forward to the follow-on, as I promised, as a gift for you for participating. We want to help you get successful with this. So let me start with a little bit of the conceptual high-level view so you see where it's going. As Cameron described, it's all about preserving those stories. We're a generation or 2 away from forgetting these stories, and it's helpful to remember that photography is really only about a 200-year-old technology, and it was an extraordinary technology in its time, the ability to capture a moment and preserve it on paper. What we're doing today, digitizing those images, is taking that image, that moment, and bringing them into a digital form so that they are preserved as a copy, but also preserved so that we can start to bring back into those images the stories, the background, the reason it mattered, the context. The digital nature of the interconnected world that we have means that we can do this in an entirely new, modern way. And that's what Ponga is all about, because we allow you to not only use digital magic, the technology of looking at the image for you with advanced AI and machine learning to detect and put names to those faces and remember those faces when they come up again, but also to be able to make connections as you tell stories, as you add context to those pictures, so that you can see things and make connections, which is how we build a narrative and a story, to tell the story of our family, to tell the story of the moment, to tell the story of an object, and pull all of these together. So as I go through this, I'll be highlighting different features of the software, but frankly, though I am a little nerdy, I will do my best to not dive into the mushy stuff of the technology and instead focus on why it matters to you and what you can do about it. Getting into this meeting and what you've seen on our previous events, you probably already understand that Ponga does some stuff for facial recognition, facial detection, and collection. You notice we don't often talk about it as recognition because what we're doing is very private. We're not going to some external database. We are letting you bring your pictures in, and we treat the information about your pictures as private data associated with your account. And now as you go through naming and collecting this information, we're not sending it anywhere else. So you're keeping that as private. And you can also extend it across your entire account and have it be meaningful. When you share it, you share that information about who these people are, but nobody else can change it. You're in charge. So that idea of ownership and privacy is very, very important to it. Also, since we're taking these images in and making them digital, we also can handle very large images. Those 50 meg images that you get from TIFF files or other kinds of things are very, very big. We'll take those, you bring them into the cloud. When you're sharing them as a link. So as people look at them and add comments into them, it's a pointer. Everybody is commenting on the same picture. And when you look at it, you're looking at a link. We do a little bit of magic in between. So you take a very large image and let you zoom in and out of it. And I'll show you some examples of doing that. Are there any questions at that high level?
I think we're good to go.
Okay, so let's just get into it. I'm going to share my screen now. I gotta find the right one to share. Let me see, here it is. And go. So, can you see me okay? This is my Ponga, we call this my Ponga library. And this just has a collection of pictures that I've used as demos. So I try to be a little discreet about who these people are, so I'm not invading on the privacy of living people, of course. Over here on my left, you see albums, and in an album are all of the pictures of that person. And they go as I upload pictures. I'm going to show you that in just a second. It goes through an analysis step that results in a gallery view where we can put names to faces. So the evaluation step takes about 3 to 5 minutes. It's actually about 3 minutes just to stop and notice if you've added any more, and 5 minutes beyond that. I'm going to upload this set of pictures, which is just a subset. And all I do is, as you might have guessed, select the pictures and drop them in there. Here I am on a Macintosh, but it works the same way on any other kind of computer. We recommend Chrome as a browser. There are some peculiarities of using Safari in particular, which just have to do with choices Apple has made in terms of privacy. We recommend using this in Chrome, and I can walk you through all of that. I have an article that walks through exactly what that is. And in fact, while this is going through there, I have uploaded the pictures. You notice the pictures all arrived here. Sometimes you want to do a little quick refresh as that's come in because the pictures are in the cloud. I've uploaded them to the cloud. It's refreshing my window here in a browser, which is how I am looking at what's in my account. As I said, it takes about 3 to 5 minutes for the analysis to happen. And while we're doing that, let me pop over here to our support center at ponga.com/help. Surprise. And here, this is new, by the way, for some of you who maybe haven't looked lately. This is part of our new website that has extensive search functionality, including this search bar, which you get to here or in the footer, and lets you look up any article. For example, there's some especially good ones, I think, here about how Ponga works and what do you call things that I find quite helpful myself for explaining what's what, but everybody learns in a different way. We also have the ponga.com/academy, which is really a central clearinghouse for a lot of different kinds of content that we have. My personal favorite is our tips and tricks that that can be a helpful place to look for articles that are going to get some common concepts. One of my favorite ones is this one called the Wedding Album Shortcut. And this basically describes how you want to think about how you're introducing your family to Ponga in the same way as if you had brought along a new partner, that new daughter-in-law, son-in-law, that you introduced to the rest of the family at a wedding or other family gatherings. Everybody's there. Lots of pictures are taken. You introduce them. This is Mary. This is Sally. This is Tom. And he or she has to then remember, this is Mary, this is Sally, this is Tom. But Ponga has a really good memory. So you tell them once, and they're pretty much going to remember as you go through and start to apply those names to your pictures. Now, here is an album that was automatically created for me and date time stamped when I added this photo, this batch of photos. Now, what the wedding album shortcut tells you is it's a good idea to think about, as you upload pictures, to think about them in useful batches that might be kind of how you already have them organized. There was that trip to Santa Fe. There was the Mary's wedding. If you load them all up as one batch and you go through that batch putting names to faces, the next time Ponga sees a face that looks very much like the face you've already named, it's going to remember them, recognize them. It's going to remember them and apply the same name you gave them earlier. If you get that wrong, that's okay. You can change and fix that. And I can talk a little bit about that. This is I'm going to go ahead and call it what it is, a demo batch. A simple tip is if you upload a batch and give it a name, all of these will sort down the left under albums based on the names that you have given people in the gallery. So if you've got batches as you brought them in, give them a different character up at the top. I like to use the tilde that's used in the Spanish ñ. I like to use that, and it's just sorted down at the bottom. Now, some of you may have noticed a quick glance, a blip while I did that. Some of these pictures are already, this one, just got it. I know, do a refresh here and see what it already has a name. Some of these already have names. That's because it has gone through the gallery. My gallery is complete. I have loaded pictures of some of these same people previously. So Ponga had detected them and put names to faces. So let's look at this one. That's Charles Moreau Harger. And here he is and other pictures of him. And I did just upload this picture and it went ahead and organized it for me, which is kind of cool. And it's gone through and made these. This is the one, I think, one picture that I had of him in this last batch. And here's another one where it has detected faces. It hasn't spotted him yet. It's not sure about her. And they're probably waiting for me here in the gallery. So when I opened the gallery, it was not sure about her. There she is. I know who that is. That's my mom. There it is. And my aunt. Now notice that I can just type a little bit of a name and it automatically pulls it up from a drop-down menu because it's named her before. And if we go back to the library and we see let's look for Betty. Where is Betty? She is Elizabeth. You know how it is when you have all those complicated names with nicknames and whatnot. Go ahead and throw them all in there because that way you can find different people can recognize who it is, or you can go ahead and change the name later. Here in this case, I had two different copies of the same picture. I'd uploaded it earlier. There's no problem. Every picture is unique and there's a good reason to want to do that, because when you share pictures with different people, you may want to tell a slightly different story about them when you share them. Maybe you keep one as the master, which has everything you ever knew about that picture on it. Because the pictures still have the same people in them, they will always be sorted into the same albums. It's really easy to find the duplicates that way. There we have, I wanted to show with respect to Betty, one of the things that's really fun to do and often comes up as a question is, how do you name the same person across their entire range of ages? It's a simple idea. We peg it to the name. So we are associating a name with a baby's face. We find every other face of a baby that is that same baby and associate that name. The elderly woman, we find, so here she is as an elderly woman, and down here she is as a baby. She was born in 1917. It's my aunt. We can put the two of those together and stream them along as she ages. You might be asked a few times, who is that person? And you would be doing that here in the gallery. Here is that other guy, that's my uncle.
Barb?
Mm-hmm.
Melissa asks, can Ponga work with Apple photo face names?
That's a really good question. It's a more complicated question than it might appear. Does it work with, in the sense that, does it care that it was named, names were given by Apple? Absolutely not. It doesn't care at all. It makes no difference. If the names are in any way embedded into the metadata of a picture in any application, metadata, depending on the variations, is more or less a standard, that's fine, and we completely preserve it. So when you upload those pictures into Ponga, we take your original image up to about 50 meg in size. We take that original image, we make a working copy, and we take your original and we put it away. We don't touch it. So that is archived. And now we take that working copy, and that's what becomes a URL, a link. And all of the content and detail that you put into it is associated with pixel ranges in that image. All of the content that you add is added in its native format, so it's not modified in some way. Text is text, pictures are pictures, voice is voice. Oh, let's talk a little bit about that. I can take any picture and add any kind of content to it. So, oh, look at that. It's Betty. I've named her in one picture. It found her in another one. And I can say, make a selection, tap the microphone. I think this was probably at the Hinsdale Country Club, because I have some other pictures of it. I'm going to have to go find those. Boom. So there is a recording. I'm Pat, by the way. And so now the recording is associated with it. And I think this was probably at the Hinsdale Country Club, because I have some other pictures of it. I'm going to have to go find. Okay, so you get the idea. I can also go in and now search the internet for pictures of that, bring in that kind of reference, bring in documents, bring in a story that I heard, or talk to her daughter Priscilla and get that feedback in, and so on and so forth. So in that way, I can bring those combinations together, always associating them with faces. And in fact, one thing that I often reference, and many of you may have seen this, notice that I just did that? This is the library of all of my pictures. I'm going to go to a picture that was shared with me. This convenient little album essentially brings that. Yeah.
Before we move on to another topic, Michael asked kind of a follow-on to Melissa's question, and that is the identification data stored in the photos themselves as metadata? And if so, are you able to later download the photos so you have copies with metadata?
No, we are not modifying the metadata in any way. If it was modified, we protect it. But we are not, this information that we put in about who is in the photo, we are not embedding into that metadata, because doing so might change formats as metadata standards change, anything like that. It's kind of like we are looking at the image itself and adding richness to the image itself as it's viewed in this display. All of that content is retained in the way an HTML works to look at a web page. all of the content is retained in its original format, not munged into the metadata of the file. A little bit like if you look at, if you ever looked at the about on a Word document, it has metadata that tells you who the author was, but oftentimes that gets garbled as files are moved back and forth in different kinds of format. You can't necessarily trust it unless you are keeping that full archive. What we're doing is creating a new flexible way to build all of that content in that you may be using in a variety of different ways. I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, and Tammy wanted to know, is there a way to upload the photo with many people, but only identify one person and add a video? So that's a real great lead in.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, why don't you show that?
So if you have a photo, for example, this one is one that has been shared with me from another one of my accounts. It's a photo that has a lot of people in it. Now, in this case, and by the way, anybody who has ever tried to use any kind of naming to people realizes that it's context sensitive. You know, just because your legal name is this is not necessarily what you're called. Especially if you have grandpa this or two different Daryls or multinational families. Like my Chinese family has different kinds of generational names for different people. There's the English name, the Chinese name, the generational name that they're actually called. So in this case, I've put in the name. In my family, there were a lot of duplicate names. So they have a lot, we used a lot of, or they did, a lot of initials. So she was LHP. My mother's name was also LHP until she married. So, you know, there's a lot of that kind of thing. They only use that with her. So in this case, I have what different people were called so that it's relevant for this discussion and everybody that I'm sharing these pictures with. But then I've also added other content. So this picture, I am happy to share with anyone who would like to use it to explore. And in fact, up here at the description of it, there is a blog post that Cameron, I see, posted in there earlier. It's a Ponga tip about 12 kinds of content that you can add to a Ponga picture. And 12 is just a convenient number. You can add any link anywhere on the web.
So Tammy, yeah. So Tammy,
if the content is media, we will attempt to embed it. So with the example of video, we will attempt to embed it. I'm sorry, Cameron, go ahead.
No, that's okay. So Tammy did ask a follow-on, which was, can she add audio as well? And the point I was going to make is, wherever she sees one of these selections, you can add any number of multimedia elements to any one of those selections,
right.
Whether it's a link to an external topic, like a map or a Wikipedia or a YouTube video. You can add your own audio, you can add your own video. Every selection you make is essentially a repository of as many multimedia elements as you want to add.
Or just straight up text. It can be anything you would like. I gave you the example of actually recording in Ponga. This one is an example of audio, which is a link at SoundCloud, which is just piano. I can also bring in a link to media like video. And I use the example of YouTube because everybody knows what YouTube is.
1,000-mile historic Chisholm Trail.
And the neat thing about YouTube is that you can determine when the play will begin. Actually, SoundCloud also lets you do that, but remarkably, it works with any kind of media that's kind of designed to be on another website. So podcasts, there are a lot of people who are starting to do family history podcasts where they're talking about a picture. It's a podcast. So isn't the picture itself relevant? So why not take that clip of sound and associate it with the picture when they're talking about the jewelry, when they're talking about the history, when they're talking about the address something came from. Maps are really fun to be able to pop right into the picture. So this picture is from, you might have gathered by now, I like to make those little square boxes go away so you can really appreciate the picture itself. And this one, by the way, that gives you some idea of the zoom ability. It makes me a little dizzy, but you get the idea. I wondered where this is. My mother told me it's from Abilene, Kansas, which is where sort of the family patriarch lived in Big Man on Campus in Abilene, Kansas at a very interesting period of history. So I happen to have the address he lived at, so I don't know as a fact, but I have a pretty good guess that this probably was on that street, Northwest 3rd Street in Abilene, Kansas, and there it is in Google Maps. The instructions for how to do that are all in that article I mentioned. You can also go in and add, as I said, text, but also attach pictures. I'm not sure that's the same Cameo, but a pretty good guess that it is, because my mother gave it to me and her mother gave it to her. That's my mother's mother. That's my grandmother. That's my aunt here. And she was actually a genealogist. So she has all kinds of, well, in those days didn't do it certainly on family trees on site. She published it into a book. So I took that book, which is this book. Yeah, this book here, and I scanned it. I did, by the way, an abridgment so that I'm not publishing information about living people, but put those elements of it, scanned it, put it into the cloud, paste a link from that right in here, and here it is. So being able to this is how we talk to each other in a modern world. Where did you see that? Oh, here it is, paste. You do that in messages all the time. This creates a way to do that is more protected. It is archived. The images are all archived. The originals are archived. You can cross-reference these. These become your account. And perhaps it's an important relevance here too, to add that our whole approach to this in terms of these precious family references is to recognize that you're taking the time to tell these important stories. We're protecting them for you, and we take that responsibility very seriously. You'll see some articles in our site about how Ponga works, and even if you go on a 6-month cruise or you lose your wallet, we're not going to turn around and destroy your account. You can suspend or deactivate your account and come back when you're back from your cruise, and keep your content here. You still have access to it. You can't share it. You can't upload more pictures until you resubscribe as a member. But there's that core approach. And in fact, when you create these pictures, you want to be able to share them. So I am a guest on this picture. It is shared with me, as it is perhaps with many of you, by Audie at Ponga, but it's private. I can't share it with anybody else. I can't reshare it. It has been shared with me. So let me go get one of my own pictures, that perhaps one I just uploaded.
While you're doing that, Barb,
Yep.
I want to address a couple of questions that have come in around the
Thank
same
you.
kind of concept. In that picture that Barb showed, the Harger family, you don't have to identify everybody in that picture. There may be only one interesting story, like the story of the brooch, or maybe the story of where that location is. You might add a map from Google Maps about how the environment has changed, but you don't feel like you have to curate every element that's in there. Now, having said that, you may want to, and it's completely under your control, whether you identify everybody and tell a story, or whether you're just finding something that might be interesting, like in this situation, this particular watch that might have been handed down. There might just be a story about the watch, but you may not add any content regarding the rest of the photograph. Now, Tammy, to your question that you've asked, one of the great powerful capabilities here that Barb will talk about later is this idea that if you guys are like I am, I have a lot of family photos and I don't know who everybody in those photos are. And so frankly, it allows you to crowdsource through family and friends, that you can ask them, invite them, or share with them your library or specific photos and say, hey, I don't know who that guy is dancing with that woman. And so can you help me identify that and give me any background details? And you can give them the authorization to be an editor and add content to your library. So that's a really great way of getting additional information from your network of family and friends to crowdsource stories that you may not otherwise know.
I'm just finishing up that idea. So I have added, I've taken this picture, shared it with you, Cameron. I have added a little note to ask you that specific question that will appear in the invitation. I send the invite. Here I have the toggle to make it so that's view only or can edit. I don't know if you noticed in that last picture I was looking at, I didn't have the ability to add voice, add recordings, add comments, because I was a view only guest on that picture. Here, I have invited Cameron as my guest. Don't worry about going in here at the moment, Cameron. And I do know who these people are. But I might have any number of questions, which I can add. Here was the question about the Rolex watch. And it really was an Oyster Perpetual, as far as I know. I don't know whatever happened to that watch. But, you know, there are things that you notice in the background when you can start to get into this level of detail. You know, this appears to have been a store or something.
I'll jump in with an answer to a question that Rose asks in the chat window regarding photos recognize faces. Generally speaking, we're pretty good at recognizing them. We can typically take it at about a 30% angle and 30-degree angle. And generally speaking, as long as the photo is reasonably clear, we can generally find a facial image somewhere between 5 and 7 years old on the young side, all the way up to the 80s. We've recognized photos into the 80s and further, because generally the technology that we're using, and we won't go into any detail here really about how the algorithms are working and the background of the technology and the architecture, but essentially facial geometry largely doesn't change in that age period. And so we're looking at a complicated map of the face around how far the eyes apart, the width of the nose, the length of the nose from the mouth, etc. Those elements stay pretty constant throughout somebody's life. And we have a very, very high hit rate on facial recognition. Once you've detected one face and identified it, we can pretty much follow that through an entire library of photos, whether it's 10 photos or 10,000. And yes, Rose, the follow-on to that is we can create a folder with unidentified faces by either skipping them or putting into a separate folder.
Yeah, it's a great way to point it out, because when you're going through the gallery, and we did this very briefly, going through the gallery and, you know, do you know who this is? Yes, I know who that is. That's Lois. And it didn't recognize her because it was, you know, this picture is in a lot of shadows. So it was not going to make the assumption. Sometimes if you, you know, I can see the name of the file. And again, this one's pretty blurry, so it wasn't able to detect it and with a great deal of confidence to put that in. But as you go through these, go through here in the gallery, you might find someone like this is, you know, my aunt's, somebody at her wedding. Somebody might know who it is. Does it really matter? Sometimes it does, and sometimes it doesn't. So what you notice that I did in my library is I created an album. I went ahead and said is it you know, was it the babysitter, or let's see, I had an unknown friend of Dorothy's. So I named her in one picture. She turns up in another picture. By adding some context to how it is that she's unknown, or using some phrases for yourself, I have just a whole collection of these as unknown. It's not unknown alone, because then they would all go in the same account. You don't want to do that. You want to have unknown with some other kind of reference to it, even unknown 1, 2, 3. And then it'll pick up all of the different pictures that same face appears in. So that's a little bit of a naming strategy, and there's an article about that too. You'll find there's a whole category for facial organization that can offer some of these tips and strategies for doing that. You notice that when I went through the gallery, I also had the ability to take a picture like this one, somebody in the background at a wedding, or is that even a face? I don't know what that is. I don't think that's anyone. I'm not going to try to name it. I'm going to simply ignore it. And ignoring takes that face in that picture and says, don't even try. I don't know who it is. Don't even try. And that really goes a long way to keeping the noise and error rates way down. And that's a big help that we find in actual practice and actually using it. Okay. So I talked, any other questions about the facial organization? Okay. And I zipped over it quickly, and I showed you sharing. Sharing is that simple at a picture level. And guess what? If I share a whole album, it's pretty much exactly the same. You go in here and Cameron, I'm sharing with you again. I can even just pick him out, and it just shares the whole thing without having to send in a whole specific note. I can also then go in, if I want to remove him from a share, I simply click X and I revoke access. That revoke access is immediate. So that if you accidentally share with that nephew that goes on and starts trouble that confuses grandma and whatever else, you just kick them out. You also, as you own your own pictures, you also have full control over you have full control over the ability to delete something. This was a funny video about Braniff at the time, and they've apparently deleted that video. So bye-bye. I can delete any comment. I can delete any comment. I can delete any selection anybody has added. I am in control. I own my own pictures. I can't delete something that someone else I can delete comments that were made on my pictures. I cannot delete comments made by someone else on someone else's pictures. Pretty simple rules that are very much like the way we behave ourselves, right? So I have walked you through a little bit about Organize, and we've talked a little bit about discovery, some of the kinds of things that you see inside those pictures. Did any of you participate in the storytelling webinar that Rhonda did for us, talking about discovering those, bringing out stories, doing oral histories, and finding the little things? I want to go back for a moment to this picture again, because it frankly was a bit of a discovery for me about my own family. You know, one of the things when you have the ability to reach into the pictures and start to go in and explore. Now, this one, to be fair, is mostly a technology demo, so I'm working to give you different kinds of content that can be in a Ponga picture. But I found myself looking at the picture deeply and starting to wonder things. I talked a little bit about the street, but I also started to wonder, one of the more obvious things about almost any picture is who took it and why? And what was the moment? Sometimes you come to these pictures with you do know these stories and you want to have those stories stay with it. This is 2 generations out. And I don't know. I found this guy was interesting. My mother, who at the time had early stages of dementia, I asked her who that was. And she says, I don't know. It was Batch. And I said, Batch? I don't know. I don't know. Is that his name? I don't know. Well, I found other evidence in other guest books that my grandmother had of his name was Bachelor. So they called him Mr. Bachelor, and it turns out he was a bigwig at General Electric, and he was my grandfather, who was the one who took the picture, was at blah, blah, blah. So you start pulling these little threads together. And it is those threads that start to become interesting to feed them, feed who's who. So here is actually that now I know is the photographer. This is this same little girl at about the same time. I know that's an edge of his house. And there is the little girl. That's actually in another Ponga picture that I have elsewhere that I can go in and start to explore. So storytelling, it can take so many different forms. It can be a narrative, a word narrative that you might have in a long description up here, or in an attached book, or an attached material that might come with something, or it might be stringing together observations and little moments. And that's where Ponga, I think, gets to be especially just fun, because now all of a sudden, what was a big chore to just organize the pictures lets you really spend some time not going through and putting names to faces, but going through and understanding why those names and faces were important. Some of you may have heard me talk about this picture, for example. This picture came to me as a lantern slide, an actual glass slide that's about 6 inches by 8 inches. It's big, and it's color. My grandfather was a hobbyist. He was a nerd, and he was doing experiments in photo processing. And this is my mom, who was, under 3, certainly probably 2. She was born 1929. So how did this happen? What is the story behind all of this? I'm still researching that. But suddenly you are looking at things that aren't visible, things that might have been sensorial, that you can remember with smells and thoughts and elements. Maybe I should pause right here. We've talked a little bit about, again, the organization and what you can discover inside of a picture, and the stories that you can associate in there, how you can be sharing them to be crowdsourcing more stories.
As long as you're,
Yeah,
as
some
long as you're
questions.
here, Barb, one of the questions that we got, and as it relates, I think, to organization, and for those of you that were at one of our prior webinars, we spent quite a bit of time talking about the organization of your images, whether you have a specific way that you want to do it chronologically or by name or by event. And Debbie asked about the file names on the left, and do we need to keep the dates or the names, and how do you do that, and how do you change it? And essentially it's do it as you see fit.
That's really a terrific question. I think a very insightful one. And Kathy, I have you here with, I think you can chime in the settings. I'll double check that in a second. Oh, you can. Good. Kathy's insight. Kathy came to us at Roots Tech, one of our very first presentations of Ponga, and came along quietly listening and then chiming in with remarkable questions. And this is why we think all of you as a community and such a precious resource to us, because Kathy's experience as a photo organizer really gave us great insight into what and how and why. What are you doing? We're creating a way. Remember, I was talking about how photographs are moments in time captured and preserved in media. It might be paper, it might be celluloid. We're introducing, well, the industry in the last 30 years has introduced a way to do that in pixels, in digital form, pixels and then bits and bytes, to preserve that and manage that. But how do you connect them? Why do you do that? What are you doing? And when would it matter? These are really complicated thoughts, actually. For my own, I'm sloppy. I'm not very careful with such things, but I tend to have whatever file format they came in, whatever file naming they came in, and I'm bringing them in. But I'm a terrible example because I'm using these in demos and things like that all the time. Ponga lets you change. We take your file name as you upload it and bring it into Ponga. Some of these you saw with file names like, it was Betty in a color test. I think I probably have some untitled, some of these, IMG numbers. I can go in and quickly and easily change that name because I know this one came from a close up of Brownie photo from Lizzie's album. So I can just do that. But once I've just done that, that IMG number might have been a relevant, useful tool to cross-reference with some other thing that I alone do. So as a general practice, it can be a really good idea to then put the original file name into the description. File originally IMG 3756, 65, whatever, and stored in blah, 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 blah. And if it's in cloud storage, you can pop the link in here too, which is another nice thing to do depending on what your workflow is, because it's not just about the images, it's actually your workflow. So Kathy, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I think the point that I think Cameron made about you need to pick a method that works for you and makes sense to you. If you try and do, like photo managers, we talk a lot about we do things in chronological order because that just makes sense. But if that makes no sense to you, then do what I've set up one that for my mother's side of the family, and I called the album that I'm working on right now Hodgson, the Farm Years, because it's after they first immigrated to Canada. And I was also going to make a comment on the changing all the names of the dated files. There's actually the dated files as you upload them could be a useful tool. If you don't work on your stuff for a little while, like perhaps me, and then you can't remember what you uploaded, it's nice to go the date, go, okay, this is the last day I ordered stuff. once you get once I finish the farm years, then I can get rid of all the dated albums because they're all going to be in that one album and I won't need it anymore. But it's kind of handy still to have those dated files, data upload. If you're maybe don't get to work on your stuff for like weeks on end and can remember. So that was just I did this wrong. I deleted all those files. I said, I don't want these dates. I uploaded them and deleted them all. So now if I want to find out if I uploaded something, I have to kind of hunt for it. So
yeah. And workflow is the best way to think about it, whatever it is that works for you. And sometimes it can take a little bit of tuning to figure out the best thing for you. I'm the sort of person that finds that I get into software and it forces me into a workflow that somebody else decided was the right best thing, and I just get angry and leave. And so we give you that flexibility. We're also trying to work with people like Kathy for best practices from experience that comes down to, and that's where our community will continue to grow and add to that. The key concept here, everybody should take away from it, is what you're doing is building a link between a physical world and a digital world. We certainly have the bias that protecting those digital originals, the paper originals, is really important, as well as the digital originals. And now we're adding content to them. Finding a way that gives you that flow between them, that there is information in when it was you scanned it. If you do just change the name willy-nilly like I just did, find a way to protect that, to keep that. What I just did in putting it into the description works, keeping a structured naming system. So it's 1937, blah, blah, blah. That works too. A little trick many people may not know that I've discovered when I talk to people, and I didn't really know. You've got a big list of picture names. You can always find anything in here using your browser's search, because don't forget, that's all here too. It finds every appearance of the word Lois, as well as finding it inside each of these. And you can, anyway, there's little stupid browser tricks. There's even a whole article just on tricks. I think that turns up if you go in here to the search and say browser tricks. There we go. The Ponga browser trick passport. And that's a nifty one I will slap in here as well. And frankly, these are browser tricks that are not just about Ponga. It's because Ponga works in a browser, because Ponga essentially swims the internet with you. So as you are doing these things, you have a way to pull all of that kind of stuff in.
So let's grab a couple of questions.
Sure.
Debbie asks that when she loads up a picture, she gets a file with a date when it's uploaded, and she has files for every person she's named, and she ends up with a lot of files. And she just wants to know, if I delete the date file, will it delete the picture from the name file?
I'm sorry, I couldn't answer that as I was listening and reading at the same time. I'm not sure I understand. Let me see if I can find you in Zoom and have you go ahead and speak. Let's see, this is
Debbie Wolf.
Debbie. Just a moment, Debbie. There you are. There you go. Oh, I think, did that pop it up? Can you go ahead? Yeah. Go ahead, Debbie, when you're ready. Hi.
Yeah, hi. On my Ponga account, when I went ahead and uploaded like 5 or 6 pictures on the same day. And then I have it on the left, it makes a file that would say today's date, February the 15th.
Yes.
With all those 5 pictures. Then I look at each of the pictures in the 5 pictures, and I put, this one is my grandmother and that one is my mom. And so it puts them into a file down below with their names.
Right.
And now I've got all these files with dates on them, as well as the ones with the names. And I only really want the ones with the names. So if I went back to all those date files and deleted them, would the pictures be deleted?
Yes. No, the pictures are not deleted. And let me, in fact, give you, well, I don't actually have to go. I don't have to go through this full example. If I upload pictures, every picture that I upload or batch of pictures that I upload creates a date time stamped album. Those are what we're calling
Yes.
albums.
Oh,
So
okay.
that I use that example. I don't know if you saw that demo batch when I first came in. I gave this example of uploading this. This had a date time stamp. In this
Yeah.
case, I just renamed the album and kept them.
Okay.
But watch this. If I just hit the delete button, don't panic. You can delete the album and all the pictures, or delete the album and keep the pictures. Generally
Okay.
speaking, you're going to want to go through those date time stamped albums and delete the album, but keep the pictures. Works like a champ.
Okay.
So
So-
those
So then the
pictures are all
pictures
still
will
here.
Still be in the file where I named them.
Yeah. Think of the, if you change the word file and call it album,
But an album.
yeah, then it'll make more sense, because it's you having a file with multiple pictures in it, that gets very confusing. So these
Okay.
are your albums, and you can always create an album of your own, and just name it there, and then go back to the library. And there was Betty's wedding. Where is Betty's wedding? There's Betty's wedding. That was Betty's wedding. That was Betty's wedding. See, every picture is a link. Think of it like a web
Okay.
page. So once you have they're all here, but they're also in the library, and they're also under Elizabeth Betty. Elizabeth, there she is. Those same
Okay.
pictures are in here too.
Yeah, that was a question as well. I wanted to know, can I create a separate album for an
Yep.
event?
Yeah. Great
Yeah,
question.
okay.
I'm sorry I didn't cover that example.
actually,
Events and places, all good examples.
let me jump in here, Barb, because we've got kind of two people with a part A and part B question on the same kind of concept. One is,
Great.
can you create folders for albums so that you could like separate, you have all your family's photos and you want your husband's side on one album and wife on the other, so that they don't want to necessarily see each other one. And then, can you also, that's part A. Part B is, can you sort the photos within the album so they appear in a specific order?
Right. So those are great questions. So the first one, can you create a separate one? Yes, you just saw that example. You can also think about how you might be using them when you upload them, and go ahead and upload them in those kind of batches, relative to how you're going to be wanting to share them in different sets. So now that this Betty's wedding is one album, I can share those as one batch, and people who did not have this album shared with them cannot get into this album. However, this album with some pictures may be in some other album that's shared with other people. And when you look at any one picture, you can see all the different albums it is shared in.
Right.
Now, your second question is, once I have an album, can I sort the pictures in the album? Great question. No, not currently. It is one of the favorite questions. Pictures are always reorganized based on when the last comment was made. So I noticed right away that the name was associated with Charles Murrow Harger in the picture called Charles M. Harger right away, because it's a really clear picture and I named him before, and it popped right up. There was a change to that picture. So a comment was made, it was reorganized. If you want to share an album in a specific order, we have a trick for that. And essentially what you're doing is you rearrange the album in the order you want it to be by updating things sequentially. You get it set, and then you share it as view only. And then no change is going to change it because it's view only. And we call that the Ponga Victoria's tip. She has I'll get that for you. There's a blog post about that. Oh, it was a member post? It might be a member post. Anyway, you'll find those in here. You're happy to. Was it about presenting an album?
It seems like we've got a lot of questions today about organizational issues. And so
Okay.
one of the things I would encourage everybody is, we've invited kind of Kathy to participate here with a little kibitzing as we go through the process. And we are adding Kathy to our content subject matter experts. And she will be doing a periodic feature on the website called Kathy's Corner, where she will highlight things that she has done as it relates to using Ponga in the telling of her own family story across her incredible library of personal photographs and artifacts and memories. And so you can feel free to tune into that on a periodic basis and see her tips and tricks and mistakes and figuring out how to do this versus that, and different kind of ways of organizing your photos and taxonomical disciplines and you name it, and she's probably done it. So, that will be a feature that we're adding to our support group in the community function of the website. So stay tuned for more activity there. Yes, we're very lucky to have her participating with us there. Let's see. I guess kind of Anne asked a question a little earlier about information being added in Ponga stays in Ponga, which is can be a little bit of a complicated question, but take a whack at that.
Does information added into Ponga stay in Ponga? Is that the question?
Yes.
Yes. I mean, anything you add to a Ponga picture is kind of like adding it into a little private diary that is only shared with the people you share it with. So if I tell a story about adoption in the family, which back in the 50s could be a very delicate question, and it's only in this album and I share it only with those family members, does it go anywhere else? Well, it depends, right? It depends on the people you share it with. Will they tell anybody else? It depends on the nature of the story. And usually people's ability to keep a story in its appropriate level of discretion relates to their understanding the level of discretion and why, right? We're grownups, and that's sort of a difference. So does it stay in Ponga? Technically, of course, we can, no one can come into a Ponga account unless A, they've been invited, and B, they come in with their own email address. Email addresses can be hacked and all those kinds of edges of technology. But this is why when you, as a member, you can invite as many guests as you like, but the guests that you invite are coming in on an email address that is authenticated. So that has to be a valid email address. They have to enter a password and come in to view the picture. So from that perspective, we're doing our part from a technology to keep those relevant family details private. We worry most of all about those pictures that talk about, the stash of gold bars that grandma had under her bed, and she's not there right now. She is in the elder care home. Gee, I hope those gold bars are okay. And you post it to Facebook, like, yeah, somebody else is going to see that. So in that sense, this is this is not going out to the public of Ponga. It's going out to the people that you invite, period.
Yeah, as we're not a social network that supports its business activities through advertising, we don't sell our clients' data to third parties to establish a revenue stream to support the company. That's why we're a subscription-based service. So we feel very strongly that as people are putting their personal artifacts, their photos, their in sometimes very, very personal and cherished stories into the service, we want to make sure that they understand that this is highly secured, under their control completely, and that we take that pretty seriously. We're running kind of towards the latter part of our time here. And so I wanted to thank both Barbara for running us through the product and Kathy for adding some of her expertise to the process. I would like everybody, if this is a valuable type of a thing, to see these product-oriented sessions, because we do have sessions that we do that are content and topic-oriented, like organization and storytelling, curation and things like that, versus the tutorials about how the product actually works. Could everybody, if you think that this is kind of a valuable topic, could you just hit me with a thumbs up on the chat, just to let me know that this is something that you'd like to see more of, and we'll make sure that you guys get informed whenever we do additional product related activity going forward. So it's been a good session today. I think this has been high value content for anybody that wants to really capture and organize those important moments and stories. So just as a reminder, as a special gift today, all attendees will have the opportunity to schedule a free masterclass with your family or your small group of people of common interest with Barbara to review not only your own plan and your photos and your challenges, but better understand how Ponga can support your own storytelling efforts. So that'll be a free opportunity for anybody today, and we'll have you sign up for that. You can also go to the website, and if you want, go to the lower left and use our chat feature. If you just want a quick one-on-one with Barb, to have her walk you through something that might be a little tip or a trick, or something that you want to know more about, or something that you heard here, or if you've run into a little stumbling block, she can typically spend just a very short period of time getting you over that and showing you something that maybe would be new and a way of effectively using the product. Also, for those who attended the prior sessions, you can claim your special offers, and we will follow up with an additional email about the $69 annual plan, which is discounted down from our $99 plan, and also receive for free the Kathy Nelson book, Photo Organizing Made Easy. Also, I wanted to make sure that everybody knew that we are going to be at Roots Tech on March 2nd through 4th. For those of you that may not be aware, you can go to the Roots Tech on Google and find out about it. It's probably the world's largest kind of genealogical and family history and storytelling event on the planet. There's about several 100,000 people that show up for this thing. We will be doing some special sessions there, and we'll send you information out shortly about our participation and the 2 or 3 individual events that we'll be having as special activities during the event. So we enjoyed sharing Ponga with you today, and want to thank everybody for coming along, your kind attention and participation, and all the great questions. We've got more to share, so please look forward to future communications from us about new content, products, events, programs, partnerships, demos, etc. And we look forward to welcoming you as members. So please check us out on the website and subscribe today and try the 21-day free trial, and we'll see you at a future event. Thanks very much for coming. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you all.